Hi, unique souls. Today we are back again with the lesson 8. My mind is preoccupied with past thoughts. There is a discernible sequence to the lessons as one continues to read and practice them. Jesus begins with simple ideas and statements about the way we perceive the world. He then quickly moves to the way we perceive our thoughts, and beginning with lesson 8, he develops much more clearly the specific cause and effect connection between our thoughts and the world. Here, for the first time in the workbook, he speaks about the world's unreality. He also introduces the idea of projection. What is projection? A principle that was implied in the first 7 lessons, but will be clearly identified in the lessons to follow. Jesus has been telling us up to this point that what we see is meaningless because what we see is coming from what we think. And what we think in our ego minds is meaningless because it denies true meaning. This has not been clearly stated in the lessons to date, although we have discussed it, but it certainly has been implied and will be more explicitly stated in the lessons to come. This idea is, of course, the reason why you see only the past. Lesson 7, I see only the past, introduced the idea that everything we perceive is meaningless because it is based on our thoughts of the past. In lesson 8, Jesus continues and extends his discussion of time and the past. My mind is preoccupied with past thoughts. It's not simply that we see only the past, which again was the theme of lesson 7, but we see only the past because we think only the past. Jesus is here introducing the idea that what we see outside comes from what we think inside. A major theme of the text. Projection makes perception. What we believe and have made real about ourselves within, whether as children of the ego or children of God, will be directly reflected in what we perceive outside, because the inner and outer are the same. This is a variation of the essential principle in A Course in Miracles that ideas leave not their source. We shall return later to this all-important theme. That my mind is preoccupied with the past thoughts is, of course, why we see only the past, although not clearly stated here, but clearly implied. It is a principle that what we see comes from what we think. That is why no one really sees anything. That is why no one really sees anything. This is another of those statements that when we begin to read the text and do the lessons, your mind will tend to gloss over because you really do not want to accept that Jesus is saying. He means this literally. No one really sees anything. Self-perception. He sees only his thoughts projected outward. In the text, there are many passages, a couple in the workbook too, where Jesus explains that the body's eyes do not see, just as a body does not think, feel, hear, or do anything. It simply does what the mind tells it to do. The body can be thought of then as simply a puppet or robot that carries out the dictates of its master. That is why we do not see anything. All that we see, and basically this see should be in quotes, is a projection of what we have been thinking. And as we have seen, what we have been thinking in listening to the ego is quite simply nothing. The mind's preoccupation with the past is the cause of the misconception about time from which your seeing suffers. One way of understanding time as we know it, as linear, past, present, future. Future is to see it as nothing more than a reflection or shadow of the ego's thought system of sin, guilt, and fear. Linear timeline. Past, present, future. Sin, guilt, fear. When we choose our individuality over the Holy Spirit's oneness and then seek to preserve this individual identity, the ego has us construct its thought system of sin, guilt, and fear. To restate this important dynamic, sin says we have sinned against God in the past. We experience guilt over what we have done in what the ego calls the present. And since guilt always demands punishment, we then become afraid of God's punishment, which we believe we deserve. That fear of punishment, of course, points to the future. If you keep in mind this unholy trinity of sin, past, unholy trinity of sin, past, guilt, present, and fear, future. So the sin is related to past, and guilt is related to present, and the fear is related to future. And the unholy trinity, these are sin, guilt, and fear. As you read this first paragraph, it will make much more sense. When we look outside, we see a world ruled by time. It is, of course, also a world of space. Space and time, as the text describes them, are opposite sides of the same mistake. Free from the constructs of space and time. When we are free from the constructs of space and time, it is where we can reach the truth. That was my contribution. Thus, everything we see outside, we see in terms of the past, because we see it through the lens of our individual identity. This identity is rooted in sin, the belief that we have separated from God and now exist as separate entities. Since we believe we are at war with God, a theme to be developed later, we must then also believe we are at war with everyone else. As a result, every perception in our world is geared toward dealing with the issue of specialness. Who is the special person who will win? And who the special person who will lose? When this is expressed directly, it is special hate. When concealed, it is special love. Moreover, specialness is rooted in the ego's notion of time, which once again comes from the belief in sin, guilt, and fear. Thus, specialness cannot be rooted in the past. The misconception about time is that it is real, there is a past, present, and future, and that the present and future are directly caused by the past. Thus, what we are today is because of our past. The future, likewise, will be merely an extension of the ego's present. Your mind cannot grasp the present, which is the only time there is. There is only present time. There is only time now. Present. But then, the misconception about time is that It is real there is a past, present, and future, and that the present and future is directly caused by the past. Thus, what we are today is because of our past. Future, likewise, will be merely an extension of the ego's present. So, past creates present, and present, since it's caused by the past, it creates the future. So basically, your past creates present and future. So it's important to change our past beliefs, past perception of what we have gone through in life, right? Actually, our perceptions, usually distorted perceptions that we agreed to adopt at certain point of time in the past, a specific point of the past, we think it's past, of course. It's an illusion, but since we are programmed by this kind of coding of there's a time, the linear timeline, so basically traveling towards our like experiences, our memories in the past, and changing the narrative, changing the story, changing our perceptions, and trying to understand the truth in those stories, in those traumatic experiences, actually. Because let me tell you, there is no such thing as trauma. There's only distorted perception. So it is only important to change your distorted perception, see the balanced perspective of the event, good and bad side, pros and cons, if you want to call it that way, the advantages, disadvantages, negative and positive sides. When it gets unbalanced, you call it a traumatic experience. However, there's no such thing as trauma in a sense, because it's made you who you are today. And you can always change the narrative about your past and get empowered, or just like attempt to see the truth in what has happened. Change the past, change the present, thus change the future. Your mind cannot grasp the present, which is the only time there is. The ego's present is not this present, what A Course in Miracles refers to as the holy instant. As this experience is not rooted in time, it is also not rooted in sin, guilt, and fear. It is rooted in the right-minded presence of the Holy Spirit, in which vision, not based on the past, and certainly not on specialness, becomes the means for love to guide us from within. You can insert your name here. I'll call my name. Melike, therefore, cannot understand time and cannot, in fact, understand anything. I don't know why, I always want to give example of James. I am sure there is James watching me. I'm sure of that. James, therefore, cannot understand time and cannot, in fact, understand anything. This is because everything we think we understand is rooted in the seeming reality of the spatial and temporal world. As long as we identify ourselves as individuals, separate and autonomous, we must believe in the entirety of the ecosystem. Everything we perceive, therefore, will be a shadow of its illusory thought of separation, which means we will not understand anything. The one wholly true thought one can hold about the past is that it is not there. This is another of those lines that, if you pay careful attention to it, should have you jumping out the window. If you are a creature of the past and there is no past, then it must mean there is no you. In the present moment, in the present memory that opens Charter 28, in the text comes the sentence, "This world was over long ago." If this is true, it means you were over long ago too. This forces us to ask, who is the you that you think is reading those words? Or in Jesus' words, in the text, who is the you who are living in this world? In other words, our existence is literally made up, and if you paid close attention to that thought, you would be terrified. If you are not, it is because you are not paying close attention to it. That statement is literally saying, as in the statement in lesson 8, that you do not exist. This would explain, as we had mentioned earlier, why doing this workbook carefully and with diligence should make you extremely anxious. Even if you are not quite sure where the anxiety is coming from, there is a part of you that recognizes what this is saying, even though, again, the language is simple and does not appear to have the same metaphysical weight found in the text. That is why you forget the lessons, do not want to do them, and tend to gloss over them and focus only on their more superficial aspects. To think about it all is therefore to think about illusions. To think about the past is to think about illusions. Stop for a moment as you do this lesson and consider how almost every single thought you have throughout the day is based on the past. Stop for a moment as you do this lesson and consider how almost every single thought you have throughout the day is based on the past. Literally. Analyze it. Observe your thoughts. Whether it is something as commonplace as picking up a coffee cup or something that would seem far more important. Thoughts about a situation, relationship, your body, or anything else are all predicated on the past. And they must be because the past is nothing more than a sin's shadow. And sin is separation. As long as you believe you are a separate entity, you must believe in the reality of sin, therefore of time. Sin, separation, time. If you believe in sin, you believe in separation, and you believe the existence of time. Very few have realized what is actually entailed in picturing the past or in anticipating the future. The mind is actually blank when it does this because it's not really thinking about anything. This statement is the basis of another statement we frequently say in workshops and classes. The thoughts we think are not our real thoughts. If they are not our real thoughts, they do not exist. It follows then that since we have identified with our thoughts, we do not exist either. The mind is actually blank when it does this, because it's not really thinking about anything. Not only is our existence an illusion, indeed, all existence is an illusion, for it contrasts with the reality of being. The thoughts we think we are not our real thoughts. If they are not our real thoughts, they do not exist. It follows then that since we have identified with our thoughts, we do not exist either. The mind is actually blank when it does this, because it's not only really thinking about anything. Not only is our existence an illusion, indeed, all existence is an illusion, for it contrasts with the reality of being. The purpose of these exercises for today is to begin to train your mind to recognize when it's not really thinking at all. It is clear from statements like this, as well as many others, that Jesus' purpose in these lessons is to train our minds. Here, specifically, the focus is the idea of thinking, to have us realize that we are really not thinking at all. We will become aware of this by recognizing how much our thoughts are rooted in the past, or although this is not the point of this lesson, how much they are rooted in fear of the future. We become preoccupied with what is going to happen, whether we are talking about the next 5 minutes or the next 5 years. We become preoccupied with what's going to happen, whether we're talking about the next 5 minutes or next 5 years, because these concerned thoughts of the future are rooted in our concerned thoughts of the past. While thoughtless ideas preoccupy your mind, the truth is blocked. This idea will be developed as we proceed. The purpose of thoughtless ideas and holding on to the past is to block the truth. Purpose remains one of the central themes of A Course in Miracles, and Jesus repeatedly emphasizes it as the means for understanding the ego's thought system, as seen in other chapters. This then is another pregnant statement our minds could slide past, because it reveals the motivation for holding on to thoughtless ideas, be they concerns of the past, fears of the future, or present feelings of guilt. They're all purposive attempts to keep hidden the truth of our identity as Christ. Recognizing that your mind has been merely blank, rather than believing that it is filled with real ideas, is the first step to opening the way to vision. Recognizing that your mind has been merely blank, rather than believing that it is filled with real ideas, is the first step to opening the way to vision. As is the case throughout the 3 books of A Course in Miracles, Jesus' focus is on having us remove the blocks to the awareness of love's presence. These blocks are the problem. We do not have to be concerned about what Jesus or truth are doing, but we have to be vigilant about what the ego is doing. It's very helpful, therefore, to understand that in holding thoughtless ideas, our minds are blank, because these ideas are about the past. It's very helpful, therefore, to understand that in holding thoughtless ideas, our minds are blank because these ideas are about the past. That begins the process of opening up to the door to true perception, the vision of true forgiveness that leads us to the truth. Opening up the door to true perception, the vision of true forgiveness that leads us to the truth. Let's take a deep breath. Hold. Exhale. Come back to the present moment. There's no past. There's no future. You can recreate your whole being in this present moment. You're not your feelings. You're not your thoughts. Remember that you are way more superior than these things. Don't identify with them. Your higher self is now in a spaceship looking at the world and your avatar, maybe laughing at your decision and what your thoughts. Try to decide everything from the perspective of your higher self. Looking at your life from above, from the space. Enlarge your vision. There are so many unnecessary, trivial things happening that you are giving your precious attention to. This is committing a real sin, if their sin were to be exist. This is a real sin. Focus on the vision. What is your vision? Why did you come to this earth? To accomplish what? To help who? Why are you here? What is your biggest desire? What is the biggest transformation that you want to create on this earth planet? You can focus on finding that every morning when you first wake up. Close your eyes for 5 minutes, please. Do this favor for yourself. Your higher self will be so happy and glad. Remember your big purpose and vision. Connect with higher self. It knows the way. It knows the way. It knows the way. The exercises for today should be done with eyes closed. This is because you actually cannot see anything, and it is easier to recognize that no matter how vividly you may picture a thought, you are not seeing anything. With as little investment as possible, search your mind for the usual minute or so. merely noting the thoughts you find there. Spend only 1 minute to note every thought you find. Some of the earlier exercises call for our eyes to be open. The point here and later on as well is that there is no difference between what we see or what we think. They are the same. Here, this is not talking about what we are perceiving externally, but focusing on what we are thinking. We see again the important emphasis placed on not making any of our thoughts special or more or less important than any other. Name each one, each thought. Name each thought by the central figure or theme it contains and pass on to the next. Introduce the practice period by saying, I seem to be thinking about X, Y, and Z. I seem to be thinking about blah, blah, blah. Then name each of your thoughts specifically. For example, I seem to be thinking about name of a person. I seem to be thinking about X, about name of an object, about the coffee cup, about being angry, and so on, concluding at the end of the mind searching period with, but my mind is preoccupied with past thoughts. But my mind is preoccupied with past thoughts. I seem to be thinking about Melike, about the glasses, about being jealous. But my mind is preoccupied with past thoughts. Okay, yeah. You can think about a person and, or an object, whatever makes you really angry, jealous, guilty, maybe happy, maybe sad. It doesn't matter, positive or negative. If there's an emotion, you can use everything that comes to your mind. Usually the negative probably memories will come, but anyway, so at the end of every thought we are saying that but my mind is preoccupied with past thoughts. Okay, this was a very heavy lesson. My mind is preoccupied with past thoughts. Yep. So let's finish our course today. I wish you good luck with training your mind with A Course in Miracles. Have an awesome, natural day.